In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, there is only war. But when the orbital augurs of the agri-world Viridia II first detected the anomalous energy signature, they classified it as a minor warp tremor. They were wrong. It was not a breach, but an arrival. It did not spew forth daemons, but something far older, a myth given flesh, a horror that predated the Imperium itself. By the time the Ultramarines' 4th Company arrived in response to the ensuing silence, there were no screams left to hear, no enemies to purge, only a planet-wide garden of perfect, petrified statues, and a lone, graceful figure waiting for them in the stillness, her hair a crown of hissing serpents. For the first time in his century of service, Brother Sergeant Cassian felt not the fire of battle rage, but the cold, primordial chill of dread. They had come to save a world. They would be lucky to escape it. A world of 12 billion souls does not simply go quiet. Yet Viridia II offered no voxhail, no astropathic scream, not even the ghost echo of a dying prayer. Our strike cruiser, the Emperor's Sword, entered high anchor to a chorus of unnerving calm. From orbit, the world was still green, but the patterns were wrong. The cities, visible from space, were not ruins. They were collections. Vast arrays of grey dots where life should have been. My squad, Tenebrae, was given the honor of first landing. The Thunderhawk's descent was smooth, the atmosphere placid. No anti-air fire, no energy signatures. Just the growing, sickening detail of the dots resolving into figures. "Throne of Terror," whispered Brother Lucius, the youngest of my command. I did not rebuke him. The central hive plaza was a tableau of terminal fear. Thousands of statues, frozen in a single, horrifying moment. A mother clutching an infant, their faces masks of terror. A PDF squad, las guns raised, their mouths open in silent warnings. Every detail was preserved with a sculptor's cruel perfection, the fold of a cloak, the strain of a muscle, the panic in a wide eye. They were not merely stone. They were people. Trapped. Auspex reads no life signs, reported Brother Valerius, his voice tight. No residual radiation, no viral particulates. Nothing. It is a Xenos weapon, I stated, the words feeling inadequate. A petrification field. Some new Necron abomination. We fanned out. Bolt guns. Tracking across the serene horror. That's when the second heresy began. The hissing. It started as a whisper, a sibilant rustle that seemed to come from the very air. Then we saw them. From beneath petrified carts, from the eye sockets of statues, they emerged. Snakes. Not the great constrictors of jungle worlds, but things of nightmare. Their scales shimmered with hypnotic, oil-slick colors, and their eyes held a chilling, sentient malice. They moved with a fluid, impossible speed, a seething carpet of venom and death. "Purge them," I roared. Bolters thundered, the report deafening in the silence. Explosive shells tore the creatures apart, painting the stone with their black blood. But for every one destroyed, 3 more took its place. They were relentless, swarming over our armor, seeking joints, seals, the grills of our helmets. Brother Lucius was the first to fall. A serpent, no thicker than a finger, shot through the vox grill of his helmet. He made a choked, wet sound, clawing at his faceplate. Then his movements stiffened. A grey pallor spread across his blue ceramite, not as paint, but as a fundamental transformation. The ceramite cracked, fused with the flesh within, becoming rough, unadorned rock. In 5 seconds, the living, breathing space marine was a monument to his own death. They bypassed the armor, target the swarm. "Flamers!" Valerius yelled, his storm bolter hosing down a writhing mass. It was then that she walked into view. She emerged from the shadow of the hive's central basilica, as if stepping from a forgotten age. A woman, tall and unnaturally graceful, her skin the color of polished marble, and her hair, it was a nest of living, hissing serpents, their gazes as intelligent and hateful as her own. She did not look at us with her face, but we felt her attention like a physical weight. Valerius, ever the embodiment of the Codex Astartes, saw a clear threat. He raised his storm bolter. "Xenos witch, your existence is an offense. Your destruction is our duty." He looked directly at her. His finger tightened on the trigger, then froze. A statue of an ultramarine, his weapon raised in defiance, now stood where Valerius had been. The transformation was instant, absolute. Horror, a feeling we are conditioned to suppress, broke through my training. This was not war. This was extermination. Tenebrae, disengage. Fall back to the Thunderhawk. Do not look at it. We ran. We, the Emperor's finest, turned our backs and fled. We crashed into the transport, the hissing swarm following us. As the ramp closed, I risked one final glance. She stood amidst her stone garden, her head tilted. One of the serpents in her hair seemed to meet my gaze and flick its tongue in a mocking farewell. The Thunderhawk lifted off. We had lost 2 brothers. We had not even engaged the primary threat. We had merely witnessed it. And as we broke atmosphere, the augurs detected a new signal from the planet's surface. Not a life sign, but a powerful, localized energy signature, pulsing from the basilica. It was not a weapon. It was a beacon. And it was calling out, not into the void, but across it, to something else that dwelled in the darkness between stars. The chapter command was in fervent debate. The picked logs were analyzed, the petrification confirmed. The Magos biologists called it rapid cellular lithification. The tech marines theorized a reality-debasing energy field. They named the threat Codex Gorgonus. I stood before them, the stink of Viridia's dust still on my armor. Honored captains, you analyze the symptom, not the disease. This is not a Xenos. It is Medusa, a Gorgon, a myth from ancient terror. Silence greeted me. Then Captain Sicarius scoffed. Myths are for primitive worlds, Sergeant. We face a tangible enemy. Is a god tangible, Captain? I countered, the heresy of my words hanging in the air. Is a daemon? Her power is not technological. It is narrative. To look upon her is to accept the ending of your story. The chief librarian, Agrippa, a psyker whose mind had brushed the edges of the Imperium for 3 centuries, raised a hand. Cassian speaks a form of truth. The entity's power is psychic in nature, yet it operates outside the warp. It is an archetype of death given form. Our conventional strategies are useless. To fight a story, we must change the narrative. A plan was formulated, cold and logical. We would deploy on the mining world of Hephaestus Beta, where the entity had been sighted. We would not look upon it. Servo skulls with high-lumen strobes and advanced picked captors would be our eyes. We would fight blind, guided by machine sight. Hephaestus Beta was a hell of ash and industry, now being reclaimed by a new, silent geology. The hissing began before our boots hit the ground. This time, we were ready. Flamers roared, creating a purging firewall. We advanced in a perfect tactical spread, our helmet displays showing only the grainy feed from the bobbing servo skulls. We found her in the sulfur canyons, standing atop a spire of slag, as if she owned the very planet. All units, confirm, averted gaze. Servo skull, primary tracking active. I voxed. Through the skull's eye, I saw her. She was watching the mechanical orb, her head cocked in curiosity. She did not move to attack. She simply observed. One of the servo skulls, the one I was linked to, flew closer, its strobe light flashing across her marble skin. She turned her head. Her eyes, through the electronic lens, met the gaze of the machine. My display exploded into static. A wave of psychic feedback, a scream of wrongness, slammed into my mind. The other servo skull feeds died instantly. The Auspex chimed in panic. Brother Sergeant, my helm. I am blind, Brother Cato screamed. The internal lenses of his helmet had turned to solid, opaque stone. We were blind again. And the hissing was closing in. Back to back. Ignite all photon flares. The canyon became a stark landscape of black and white. In that blinding light, I saw her shadow cast against the canyon wall, a monstrous, distorted thing of lashing tendrils and rage, a truth her beautiful form hid. We fought a fighting retreat, leaving 3 more brothers entombed in their own armor. We had survived by sacrificing our sight and our brothers. We had learned a terrible lesson. Her curse could flow through any medium that carried her image, even a digital one. Back on the ship, Librarian Agrippa found me in the chapel. staring at my reflection in the polished gold of the imperial aquila. "The myth," he said softly, "tells of a hero named Perseus." He did not look upon the Gorgon directly. He used the reflection in his polished shield. "We have no shields, librarian." "Only guns," I replied, my voice hollow. "Then we must make one," he said, his eyes glowing with a grim light. "The tech priests of Graia have something that might serve. A living mirror." The living mirror was a squad of Sicarian infiltrators from the Legio Cybernetica. Their princeps, a hollow-cheeked man named X77, spoke with the bored tone of one discussing engine lubricant. "Our optical receptors are multispectrum sensor suites. We do not see as you do. We build a composite data model. There is no singular gaze for the curse to exploit. It was our last, desperate gambit. We descended into the cavernous primary manufactorum of Graia. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and cold stone. The Adeptus Mechanicus had made their stand here. They had failed. The result was a forest of exquisite statues, tech priests with mechadendrites frozen in mid-gesture, Skitarii rangers in aiming, promise of a stony end. We were wounded, low on ammunition, and trapped in the dark with a wounded, vengeful goddess. And as we ran, a new sound joined the hissing, a low, wet, chortling laugh from a shadowy duct. The air, once tinged with ozone and stone dust, now carried a familiar, rotten sweetness, the perfume of plague and decay. Our war was no longer a solitary nightmare. We had drawn the attention of the never-born. The great game had found a new peace, and the Lord of Flies wanted to play. The darkness in the underhive of the manufactorum was not merely an absence of light. It was a physical presence, thick with the smells of stale lubricant, rust, and a new, foul sweetness that clawed at the back of the throat. The hissing of the serpents echoed from the corroded pipework, a relentless soundtrack to our flight. But beneath it, another sound grew, a wet, wheezing chortle, and the heavy, dragging tread of something immense. We took cover behind a collapsed conveyor belt, our helmet lamps cutting feeble beams through the gloom. Brother Antaro, our apothecary, checked our remaining ammunition. 3 magazines each for the bolt guns, 1 plasma cell at 20%. "The Emperor provides," he muttered, though the phrase sounded more like a question. "He provides a test," I replied, my gaze fixed on the tunnel ahead. "Our faith is the ammunition." The source of the chortling rounded the corner. It was a plague marine, a hulking traitor of the Death Guard. His bloated, green armor wept a viscous slime, and the air around him shimmered with pestilence. Nurglings, giggling little daemons of filth, capered at his feet. He raised a plague spewer, its muzzle dripping with corrosive phlegm, but he never fired. From the shadows above, a knot of Medusa's serpents dropped onto him. They struck at the joints of his armor, seeking flesh. The plague marine swatted at them with a contemptuous grunt, his corrupted biology likely immune to their venom. But then he made his mistake. He looked up towards the gantry from which they had fallen, and there she was. Medusa stood on the rusted ironwalk, her marble form a stark, beautiful blasphemy against the decay. The plague marine saw her. His body, already in a state of constant, blessed decay, began to change. The bloated flesh did not just turn to stone, it fused with the rot. Pustules hardened into grotesque jewels. Weeping sores became sealed, stony craters. In seconds, he was a monument to disease and despair, a new kind of horror frozen for eternity. The Nurglings, confused, poked at their petrified master. Then, one by one, they looked up at Medusa. They too hardened into tiny, leering stone gargoyles. The hissing intensified. Medusa's gaze swept the chamber, and it fell upon us. "Down!" I roared. We hit the deck as her gaze passed over our position. The conveyor belt we hid behind sizzled and softened, its metal flowing like water before solidifying into a wave of rough, grey rock. We were pinned. Before us, a vengeful goddess whose gaze meant instant death. Behind us, the echoing, cheerful stomps of more Death Guard reinforcements drawn by the commotion. We were in the crossfire of two apocalypses. "It is a standoff," Antaro hissed. "The Neverborn are drawn to her power, but they are fuel for her garden." "A standoff we cannot win," I said. My eyes fell upon a large, polished sheet of plasteel that had fallen from a gutted storage unit. It was scratched and dented, but it reflected the scene in a distorted, warped manner. The librarian's words echoed in my mind. To fight a story, we must change the narrative. A plan, born of desperation and heresy, formed in my mind. "Brothers, we are not going to fight," I said, my voice low and steady. "We are going to be directors. We are going to make the monster and the plague kill each other." We would use the plasteel as a shield, not to hide behind, but as a weapon. We would angle it, reflecting the image of the Death Guard onto Medusa, and her image onto them. We would turn the Manufactorum into a house of mirrors, where every glance was a death sentence. We would commit the ultimate transgression, using a Xenos god as a weapon against a Chaos god. And if we failed, our souls would be forfeit to both. Antaro, Caius, with me, Goriel, provide covering fire against the serpents. Draw their attention. The plan was a fragile, insane thing. Goriel, our heavy weapons specialist, stood and unleashed the last of his bolter rounds into the swarming snakes, creating a distraction. The three of us grabbed the large sheet of plasteel. It was heavy, even for our enhanced strength, its surface a distorted panorama of the nightmare around us. We angled it, my heart thudding against my ribs. In its warped reflection, I saw the tunnel entrance where more Death Guard were emerging, their diseased forms shambling forward. I adjusted the plate. "Now," I yelled. The reflection of the lead plague marine, a hulking brute with a rusted great axe, fell directly upon Medusa. She reacted instantly, her head snapping towards the reflection. Her gaze, channeled through the plasteel, struck the Death Guard. The effect was slower than on a living being, as if her power had to fight the demonic resilience within him. His advance slowed, his flesh crackling and hardening, his axe fusing to his stony hands. He became a statue mid-charge. But the other plague marines saw their brother fall. They saw Medusa on the gantry. With guttural war cries in a blasphemous tongue, they opened fire. Blight grenades arced through the air, exploding near her feet, spraying corrosive slime. Medusa shrieked in fury, a sound that cracked the rock around her. She turned her full attention on them. Her gaze swept the tunnel entrance. Two more Death Guard petrified, but a third, shrouded in a toxic mist, was only partially affected, his arm and side turning to stone while the rest of him stumbled on. It was chaos, a battle of absolutes, the ultimate, unchanging finality of stone against the relentless, proliferating resilience of decay. We moved the mirror again. This time, we caught Medusa's reflection and aimed it at a group of plague-bearers, the lesser daemons that now swarmed into the chamber. They dissolved into piles of calcified sludge. We were the puppeteers of death, dancing on a razor's edge. A single misstep, a moment where we saw her directly in the metal, and it would be over. Then, the greatest horror arrived. The ground shook. From the largest tunnel, a thing of immense, putrid bulk squeezed its way into the chamber. A great unclean one of Nurgle's mightiest daemons. Its bloated body was a mountain of filth, a single bloody eye staring from its head, a gigantic rusted cleaver in its hand. It laughed, a sound that promised only despair, oomed, its voice like a swamp bubbling. "Grandfather finds you. Interesting. He wishes to add you to his garden." The daemon did not have eyes to turn to stone. Could it be affected? Medusa, for the first time, seemed uncertain. She focused her gaze upon the greater daemon. The flesh on its chest began to gray and crack, but with a wet, tearing sound, the petrified flesh sloughed off, revealing fresh, diseased tissue beneath. It was too resilient, too saturated with the power of the warp. The great unclean one took a step forward, then another, laughing as it slowly resisted her power. We were going to lose. Our mirror was useless against this. "Brother Sergeant," Goriel yelled, his bolter empty, now using his combat knife to fend off snakes. "The plasma reactor. The core chamber is directly above us." I looked up. Through the grated floor of our level, I could see the faint, hellish glow of the plasma core from the chamber where we had first wounded her. The architecture was fragile, battered by the fighting. A new, final plan crystallized. A suicide mission. Antaro, Caius, position the mirror. Reflect her gaze onto the structural supports of the chamber above. Goriel, with me, we draw the daemon's attention. It was the end, and we knew it. We were sacrificing ourselves to create a tomb for a god and a demon. Goriel and I charged, not at Medusa, but at the great unclean one. We were insects, screaming our defiance. The daemon laughed, swatting Goriel aside with a casual backhand. My brother in arms smashed against a wall, his armor cracking, and did not rise. I fired my plasma gun. The superheated shot struck the daemon's face, making it bellow in pain. It focused its single, hateful eye on me. In that moment, I saw Antaro and Caius, straining, angling the plasteel sheet. The reflection of Medusa, her face a mask of fury at the resistant daemon, was projected onto the cracked and weeping support pillars that held up the plasma core chamber. Her gaze, amplified by her rage, washed over the metal. The pillars turned to stone, brittle, ancient stone. There was a deafening groan of tortured metal and rock. Then, with a cataclysmic roar, the ceiling of the sub-level and the floor of the plasma chamber above gave way. The great unclean one looked up just as a torrent of molten plasma and 1,000,000 tons of shattered rock and metal consumed it. It roared, its form dissolving in the starfire, its essence banished back to the warp. Medusa, caught in the center of the collapse, was buried under the cataclysm. A shard of plasteel, sharp as a blade, shot down from above and impaled her through the chest, pinning her to the ground just before the molten core flooded over her. I saw her for a single, unguarded moment, not as a monster, but as a figure of tragic, terrifying beauty, her face turned to the collapsing ceiling, her serpents writhing in a final, silent scream. Then the plasma fire consumed her, and the mountain of rubble sealed her tomb. The heat was immense. I was thrown back, my armor scorched, my world going black. The last thing I saw was Antaro and Caius, pulling my broken body from the inferno, the hissing
of the snakes, finally, blessedly silent. They tell me I am the only one who survived. Antaro and Caius fell to their wounds during the extraction. Goriel's body was never recovered. The tech priests have declared Graia a lost cause. The entire Manufactorum complex is a fused, radioactive tomb of stone, slag, and plague, sealed under a quarantine field. They have classified the Gorgonid threat as extinctus, a victory. But in my dreams, I do not see victory. I see a garden of stone on Viridia II. I see Brother Lucius hardening into rock. I see the great unclean one laughing as the stone sloughs from its flesh. And sometimes, in the deepest, most silent part of the night, I imagine I can still hear a faint, sibilant hissing, not from a planet, but from the space between stars. A myth is a powerful thing. It is a story. And a story does not truly die. It only waits for someone to tell it again. The Inquisition has debriefed me. They have taken my logs. They believe the threat is over. I know the truth. We did not kill the story. We merely ended a chapter. Somewhere, in the dark, another page is waiting to be turned. A year has passed since the tomb of Graia was sealed. Brother Sergeant Cassian wears his scars like medals of dishonor, the hissing silence forever echoing in his mind. The Imperium has declared victory, but Cassian knows the truth. You cannot kill a story, only delay its ending. When a rogue Inquisitor's vessel emerges from the Graia quarantine zone, its hull transformed into beautiful, petrified wood, and its crew frozen in poses of worship, Cassian receives a final, terrible mission. The Gorgon's curse was never a weapon, it was a seed. And now across the sector, that seed is beginning to bloom, calling its children home to a garden that spans stars. They call me the Gorgon Slayer in hushed tones. The title tastes like ash. I did not slay a monster. I survived one. My victory was a pyre built from the bodies of my brothers and fueled by heresy. The nightmares have not ceased. In them I do not see Medusa's face, but the great unclean ones. How its petrified flesh sloughed away to reveal fresh decay beneath. The two powers, stone and plague, were not destroying each other. They were learning to coexist. My solitude was broken by Chapter Master Calgar himself. He stood before me in the Hall of Heroes, his bionic arms crossed. The Ordo Exynos has a task for you, Cassian, one only you can perform. He showed me picked feeds of the Eternal Vigil, an inquisitorial vessel that had breached the Graia quarantine against all orders. It had emerged months later, drifting silently into the Macridge system. Its inquisitor, Livia Valerius, was studying Xenos artifacts. She believed the Gorgon's power could be harnessed. We boarded the Eternal Vigil. The air was cold and still. The crew were not statues of terror, but of ecstasy. Their faces were turned upward in rapture, hands clasped in prayer, and they were changing. Delicate stone vines grew from their fingertips, connecting them in a silent, petrified choir. The ship's corridors were no longer metal, but had transformed into something resembling the interior of a geode, crystalline and beautiful. In the Man Observatory, we found Inquisitor Livia Valerius. She was partially transformed, her lower body fused with the command throne, stone vines creeping up her torso. But she was still alive. "She is beautiful," Valerius whispered, her voice like grinding pebbles. "Her truth is absolute. In a universe of change and decay, she offers perfection, permanence." "Where is she?" I demanded. "She not. They," Valerius corrected, a stony smile cracking her lips. "The children hear the mother's call, the song in the stone." She raised a hand and the view screen activated. It showed a star chart of the sector. Dozens of systems glowed with a familiar energy signature. Agri-worlds, mining colonies, even a shrine world, all had reported strange geological phenomena, statue gardens appearing overnight. "The Mycenae system," Valerius rasped, "where the first seed fell. They gather there, the faithful. They prepare the garden for the mother's return." Her eyes met mine, and I saw it. Not the petrifying curse, but something worse. Absolute, unwavering faith. "The form is final, Cassian. The form is peace. Join us. Become eternal." I raised my plasma pistol. There is no peace in stone, only silence. I granted her the permanence she sought. As we left the ship, Tech Marines reported something impossible. The stone vines were still growing, slowly spreading across the hull of our strike cruiser. The chapter council was divided. Some called for exterminatus on every infected world, but librarian Agrippa warned that destruction might only spread the spores further. We had to find the source, the first seed, in the Mycenae system. As we prepared to depart, I received a private astropathic message from an unknown source. It contained only 3 words: the serpent's gamus, and a set of coordinates deep within the Eye of Terror. The Mycenae system was a graveyard wrapped in beauty. The star itself seemed paler, its light cold and sharp. Where there should have been asteroid belts, there were instead intricate floating sculptures, petrified ships, ancient space hulks, even a Necron tomb ship, all woven together with bridges of living stone. Mycenae Prime was no longer a world. It was a work of art. The continents had been carved into vast geometric patterns. The oceans were frozen solid, their surfaces polished to a mirror sheen. And everywhere, the statues. Not just humans, but orcs, Eldar, Tyranids, every species that had ever set foot there, frozen in attitudes of peace and contemplation. No weapons, observed Brother Titus, my new second in command. He was young, eager, and had not seen what I had seen. That is what frightens me, I replied. We landed in what had once been a hive city. The towers were now smooth, elegant minarets, covered in intricate carvings that told a silent, terrible story. The story of Medusa's arrival, her gift to the galaxy. The air was filled with a soft, melodic hissing. Not aggressive, but harmonious. A song. We found the faithful in the central plaza. Thousands of them, humans and Xenos alike, kneeling before a vast polished obsidian pool. They were not prisoners, they were supplicants. As we watched, a woman stepped forward, looked into the pool, and smiled as the petrification took her. She did not scream. She sighed of relief. They are worshipping, Titus whispered, horrified. They seek this. Then we saw the gardeners. They moved through the crowd, tall, elegant figures with skin of marble and hair of slender, crystalline serpents. They were smaller than Medusa, less defined, as if unfinished, but their gaze held the same power. They would occasionally touch a worshipper, and that person would transform instantly, becoming part of the garden's architecture. One of them approached us. It did not attack. It bowed,